what's happening in your country. So we were protesting in solidarity.
Nice.
Well, thank you. Everybody, we're a little late, but that's all right because it's good to wait for something good. And I expect we'll have something very excellent today. Our speaker today is Sigrid Stagl, who's a professor of environmental economics and policy at the Vienna University of Economics and Business. And she's also the founder of the Institute for Ecological Economics. Her work addresses societal challenges like climate change, environmental problems, inequality, food systems, very much an interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary approach. As we were talking earlier, she's also one of the grads from RPI, so we have several today. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you for doing this today.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it. And this will be as much a personal journey as a presentation. So I hope you'll find it interesting. I'll use my slides. Do you see them also in the presenter mode?
In the presenter mode, we see, yeah.
Yeah, that's not ideal. I'm not sure how to do this. Maybe this one. Sorry. Goes automatically to presenter mode. Sorry. Does anybody know how I can do this without presenter mode? Because this is not my default setting.
What software is it?
PowerPoint. And weirdly, it goes automatically into presenter mode, which is not how I've normally set it up.
I think it depends upon which monitor you choose as your main monitor.
Maybe it's because I have the second monitor on here. I turn that off, and then I'm probably back to my normal routine. Just a second. No, it's not in presenter mode, exactly. Thank you very much for this hint. This was very helpful. Okay.
Perfect.
Here we go. Okay, my topic for today is very, very, very broad, socio-ecological economics, but I want to make a case for accounting for the social dimension as well as the environmental dimension when we are doing ecological economic analysis. And so for us in the Vienna group of ecological economics, economics is the science of social provisioning. And I started with this work, well, 25 years ago. It's such a long time. But when I was at RPI, I studied the social institutions of a very simple market, namely community-supported agriculture. Roxbury Farm CSA in upstate New York was the case. And I was interested in theoretical innovations as well as empirically grounded work. And on the outside, it was on the one hand, yes, of course, we need for sustainable development improvements on the production side, but also reductions on the demand side. I think that is still the case. We're still struggling with finding levers to make the demand side reductions attractive. There are substantial resistance to questioning the consumption patterns. And what I definitely didn't want to use, and I've never used in my research, is a preference-based approach, and instead have applied human needs-based analysis, in this case of food consumption. The human needs approach that I adopted at the time was from Max Neve, and the example of a local food market model that showed the relationship between consumer needs and sustainability indicators, and they can be applied to point to more sustainable consumption patterns and models of consumer behavior. One of the attempts that I made with this study 25 years ago at RPI was to show that these farms, these community-supported agriculture farms, actually do deliver something to our society and to our economy that is underaccounted for, because, of course, not all the externalities are internalized. And I wanted to use a theoretical approach, but also show empirically that they are delivering a lot more to society than just vegetable boxes, basically. And actually, the results were really interesting, I think. So, of course, the social foundations of planetary and planetary boundaries integration was championed by Kate Raworth, and this is still an approach that we are using. We've developed it a bit further because, as Kate Raworth says herself, that the center, the social foundations that she included in the donut were not theoretically founded, but based on policy documents. Because she didn't want to put her preferences forward, so she used policy documents in order to extract these social dimensions, in order to make sure that they had gone through some democratic process. Well, I think as social scientists, we would want something a bit more theory-based, and this is why we have reconceptualized it slightly, but very much borrowed from Kate Raworth, and put human flourishing in the center. And then, of course, human flourishing can be conceptualized as either the human needs approach or subjective well-being, or with the capabilities approach, just to name 3 examples. But we are using sort of that approach in our Institute for Ecological Economics as sort of a guide. I mean, this is, of course, not a known theory, but just as a pre-analytic vision to start from. On the one hand, the focus is on human need satisfaction for all, or human flourishing more broadly. And we want to do that within the planetary boundaries. And of course, we acknowledge that natural science information is very important, is an important input into our analysis, but there's still a societal negotiation process and trying to understand the uncertainties and making decisions according to democratic rules. That's the blue area here. In order to together produce, as Kate Raworth has said, as a safe and just space for humanity. And this is, of course, from Dan O'Neill and his team, the further development of human needs and provisioning systems that is very much used in nowadays ecological economics, which is very consistent with our earlier attempts. And this is the latest study that was done based on this approach. A PhD student of mine who just completed last week his PhD thesis, his doctoral project. He defended his thesis, and I didn't require him to do that, because when we hire somebody, they are very much free to choose the topic. But he chose local community-led economic initiatives as his topic, and studied 3 community-led economic initiatives. So really taking forward, picking up from where I'd left it with my thesis and the follow-up work, and developed it further, or building on this concept of provisioning and human needs, and doing empirical analyses with a focus on how these initiatives can be scaled up. So this is something that is in our interest these days. So that's Roman Hausmann, whose work I highly applaud, and he's in the process of publishing it. The second aspect that I wanted to show you today is how we are using the social dimension, and this is why it's socio-ecological economics, in terms of the social acceptance of various forms of energy technologies. And the specific study that I'm going to talk about is from the Austrian National Energy and Climate Plan. I'm not sure whether you're familiar with the European institutions, but every EU member state has to develop and submit a national energy and climate plan. And then, of course, together they need to add up to the EU commitment. So this is a legal requirement. You have to do that by EU law. Some governments like ours were struggling to develop it, but I'll talk more about it in a minute. Public acceptance, of course, plays an important role to develop public acceptance in a democracy. And of course, we do not just assume that there are given preferences, but that public discourses that we have, they are shaping preferences. Hence, we have endogenous preferences. It's the responsibility of decision makers to heed public preferences and to act responsibly and not just follow the polls. I'm speaking from a country where we did have a chancellor about 4 years ago who did everything that the polls recommended, and this was really not good public policy. So decision support for public participation has been one of my research strands for over 20 years, really. Of course, we need to distinguish, as Arnstein reminded us, or actually developed this ladder of participation already in 1969. So this has been around for a long time, but there are big differences between what we call participation. It can start from manipulation to informing consultation, where the power is not transferred over to those who are involved in the process, but rather stay with the decision maker. And as we hike up, or as we go up the ladder, it gets more and more towards giving power to the participants of the participatory process with partnership, delegation, and maybe even citizen control. Yeah. And I think it's really important to distinguish between these types of participation, because otherwise it's often a fixed leave that participatory processes are put in place, but the decision has already been made or is made by the decision makers. This is a combination of methods that I've developed together with my team over the years, and we've used it in several applications in the energy field. Energy transition is a field that I've worked in a lot. So this combination of methods of participatory decision-making in order to achieve better, more robust decisions. And what we do normally is 3 stages of this research. On the one hand, the first stage is the participatory development of energy futures, either working with stakeholders or with citizens. And we always start from a white sheet of paper. So we come in with nothing is given. It's the stakeholders or the citizens who develop narratives. They develop visions for their city, for their community, or for the country. And after a workshop of 2 days, roughly, we normally have 4 narratives of such energy futures. In the same workshop, we also ask them to identify the sustainability criteria against which they want these energy futures to be evaluated. And then we're translating these energy futures, these narratives, into energy mixes. This is an analytical phase, of course, which takes several months. And then we do a multidimensional appraisal by use of a multi-criteria analysis. So we fill the impact matrix because we have the criteria given by the stakeholders or citizens, and we have the options, the visions, energy mixes, and then fill this impact matrix. That's quite a laborious process because not always can we find secondary data. Sometimes we have to go out and collect our own data or do expert interviews. And this is then the second workshop where we present this impact matrix to the stakeholders or citizens and inform them about how we have interpreted their visions. And then we ask them in the workshop about the weights for the multi-criteria analysis. And we can do that. Sometimes we do that with interviews prior to the workshop. when it's with stakeholders or if it's with citizens, they normally like to talk to each other to find their feet in determining the weights of the different dimensions. Sometimes we just put a line in the room with numbers from 0 to 100, and they position themselves. They just walk along and see where the others are positioning themselves and so on. So it's really a participatory exercise to identify these weights. But normally we don't do group weights, we do individual weights. And once we have these weights, of course, we can then in the workshop calculate the ranking of these visions that they had developed with the energy mixes. And then we normally take the top ranked, or maybe two top ranked, depending on how close they are with each other, and talk through whether this is really the preferred option for them. Maybe there are some elements of the other three options that they would like to bring into this energy future. And by the end of workshop 2, we have a preferred energy future for their community, for their region, for their country. And in the third workshop, then what we do is backcasting, meaning in order to achieve this, let's say, climate neutrality by 2040 for your city, which steps are necessary. And so that's again a participatory process, and of course we guide them in terms of how large, what's the magnitude of the emission reduction that's achievable with particular measures. And at the end of workshop 3, we have then a mix of measures which the citizens or stakeholders have suggested. Of course, then we go back and evaluate whether that's enough, and if not, then we add sort of a bit of more strength to the measures. And that's then the end of it. So then what we report back to the decision makers is on the one hand, a preferred option, a vision of the city, the region, the country, but also measures which were developed in a participatory way. We've done this in empirical analysis in Austria as a research council funded project to develop the method. Then we did it in the UK with then it was called Department of Trade and Industry as part of an energy white paper, an input into an energy white paper. In Austria, we recently did a national study on behalf of the Austrian Broadcast Corporation, the Mother Earth focus of the ORF, so that it was part of the programming of the Austrian Broadcast Corporation. On the regional level, we did an analysis in the southeast of England, and we also did 2 local studies in Austria and they were both in Austria, but in different provinces. So this is to account for the social dimension very much along with the ecological and the economic dimension. And of course, democracy and sustainability need to go hand in hand, but I don't think I'll go through that in detail now. To end with, I want to tell you about a study that I did recently about the social acceptance in one particular community in Lower Austria, which is just adjacent to Vienna. And we have this phenomenon of NIMBY, of course, not in my backyard, with regards to wind energy in particular. And we recently had in the most southern province of Austria a regional sort of a poll, which was a very suggestive way of posing the question. It was a horribly put question. Don't you agree that we should preserve our pristine alpine landscape or something like that? Or do you want wind turbines? Something like that. I mean, it was horribly formulated. So there was a majority then. It wasn't a strong majority, but there was a majority who said, no, we really don't want any wind turbines in our region, which would be horrible, of course. So that's NIMBYism, because that is a region that doesn't have any wind turbines at the moment, and they basically said we don't want any anywhere near us. Bizarrely, this is the region where we did one of the local studies where people were very much pro working towards climate neutrality and so on. So there are of course different messages that you can identify when you talk to different cohorts of decision makers. So NIMBYism is, of course, a phenomenon that is well known. Very high levels of support for climate protection are what we find in surveys of general attitudes, climate protection in more broadly, or also of wind energy. At the same time, the resistance of specific measures in local communities goes hand in hand with that. So is it NIMBY, not in our backyard, but in the literature we can also find PIMBY, which is please in my backyard. And in this particular study, which I did on behalf of an energy utility, no, sorry, this was not. This was on behalf of the Austrian Ministry of Climate Action. We selected measures of highest priority for the National Energy and Climate Plan consolidation. The situation was such, I mentioned this National Energy and Climate Plan, which we need to send to Brussels. And the coalition government, last week we just got a new government, but the previous one, which had to send the report, which was Conservative and Green party coalition. And of course, the Green Climate Minister wanted to be very proactive and send a very good National Energy and Climate Plan to Brussels, but the Conservative coalition partner was very much holding back. So what they could agree on in terms of measures wasn't good enough. There were 13 percentage points of emissions that still needed to be reduced, and they just couldn't agree on it. So the Ministry of Climate Action called for or advertised a public consultation. No, sorry, yes. It was a public consultation, but mostly sent out to stakeholders. So it was mostly stakeholders who responded, basically. And they identified a range of measures which various stakeholders named and they thought would be useful for closing this gap of 13%. So then what we did on behalf of the Ministry of Climate Action, and we means 55 researchers from all Austrian universities, working together with the respective specializations to go through this more than 1,000 measures that were suggested through the stakeholder consultation and pull out the most effective ones in order to reduce this gap of 13%. And then we came up with 27 measures. And then what I'm reporting about now is a public poll which we did then in my institute together with Gallup, and we asked the Austrian public what they thought of these 25 measures in order to make it as difficult as possible to the Conservative coalition partner not to agree to them. Because they had been suggested by the stakeholders, they were evaluated by the scientists, and then now we were checking with the Austrian population what they thought of them. So we selected the measures of the highest priority from the National Energy and Climate Plans consultation, about 27 measures from various areas, transport, energy, biodiversity, and so on. We undertook a national survey with 1,500 Austrians in this case, because it needed to be the voters. So we didn't use people who live in Austria, but really with nationality. Aged 16, because this is when you can start voting in our country, and over. The collaboration partner was Gallup Austria, and the survey period was the beginning of last year. The main result was that 23 of the 27 measures got very high support, more support than opposition. And to give the main message away, the 4 exceptions were the 3 measures of speed limit, meaning going from 130 kilometers per hour to 100 kilometers per hour on our motorways, going from 100 on sort of the main roads to 80 kilometers per hour, and in built-up areas go from 50 kilometers per hour to 30 kilometers per hour, which was suggested in terms of speed limits, super cheap measure in order to achieve emissions reduction and also have social co-benefits. And the 4th measure that didn't get majority support was stop combustion engines in vehicles, which was particularly curious because we have already a stop of combustion engines in vehicles on the EU level by 2035 agreed. So it is already effective for us as an EU member. We were just curious and threw it in, and surprised because we expected that the Austrians had a different view, and surprise, surprise, they do. Here is an overview of the measures, the 27 measures. And I'm not sure whether you can read them, but oh, sorry, they are in German. Ow, ouch. So it's in traffic, in agriculture and biodiversity, in energy, in buildings, and other measures. So they were in public transport expansions, speed limit, strengthening organic farming and ecosystem protection. This is a particular one. I'll come back to it in a minute. Energy, an expansion of renewables, stop fossil fuels, stop subsidies for fossil fuels, buildings, stricter building codes, stopping fossil fuel heating systems, and then measures in support of circular economy, waste prevention, research and education, and governance, such as the expansion of the deposit system, which we have in place now, and supporting green jobs and taxes. I mentioned the ecosystems. That is a measure that actually got great support in the survey. I'll show you the results in a minute, but it was super controversial in Austria because it's a nature restoration law which was put up for a vote in Europe on the EU level, and the vote was very tight. And it was our climate minister who tipped it over so that it could be adopted on the EU level. But the conservative government coalition partner, the chancellor, had explicitly said he does not want our climate minister to vote in favor of this nature restoration law. And she went and did it anyways because, well, ministers are not bound by what the chancellor does. Of course, he could have released her, but he didn't do that. So she was in office and was eligible to vote, and she used her decision power. And as we can see, this is the second one here. Green means support, and orange means opposition. This is the second measure here, the restoration of ecosystems. It had great support in the population. So actually, the poll received quite some attention in Austria because it was around the time when the minister went to Brussels and voted in favor of it. So as you can see here, 23 of the 27 measures have great support from the Austrian population. And this is a representative sample of the Austrian population. But as I said, the speed limits, unfortunately, did not get sufficient support, which is a real pity because it would be such a cheap measure and have social co-benefits. Some of the more detailed results, the 4 items that show the were the highest resistance were shown. They're all transport related, and they're all very close to individual human behavior. The speed limits and the registration of combustion engines. Oh gosh, I have a problem. I'm sorry, I thought I had plugged it in, but somehow my okay, I think it should be fine now. Let me just check. Have it plugged in? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, to go back. There we go. Okay. So next, of course, we did some regression analysis. There's a high level of significance for the educational attainment variable. So that was the main, not surprising result, that the higher the education, the more support for the higher the social acceptance of these climate measures. Higher age has a slightly negative effect on the acceptance of climate protection measures. And the place of residence also shows that people from urban areas have a higher acceptance of climate protection measures than people from rural areas. This effect disappears when including the variable car use, which could indicate that the lower acceptance in rural areas can be attributed to a higher dependency or frequency of car use. And here are some measures from transport, where pretty much a similar result. And in terms of biodiversity, age has a weak negative effect in this case. Otherwise, it's the same as before. Gender has a stronger effect on biodiversity measures than on the other measures. And there was one version that we added, namely that it was not only the 1,500 representative Austrians whom we sent the survey to, but also citizens who had been selected either on the national level or on the city level to represent Austrians and being involved in decision making. These are the Climate Council, which was a national initiative, or the Climate Teams, which was a Viennese city initiative. So we sent the survey also to 58 members of the Research Council, the Climate Council and the Climate Teams, asked them the same questions. And as you can see, when just aggregating over the social acceptance, the Climate Teams, who were representative at some point, when at the start of the process of being part of the Climate Council or the Climate Teams, it looks like they have learned a lot about the need for having climate prediction measures, and their acceptance is significantly higher than the sample of the 1,500. Although the sample of 1,500, we were already quite pleased with the support, but with only minor ability of being informed about climate change and having a role in a governance process can bring any citizens to a much higher level of support of climate protection measures. That's what we see here. Here are just all of the results, and I thank you very much. And here's just a little bit of advertising. I just wanted to show that we have a master's in socio-ecological economics and policy, where we are currently interviewing for the 14th cohort. So we've had the master's program in place for 14 years. It's running successfully. And new is, as of last year, a new bachelor's major, economics, environment, and politics, which is pretty much sort of a mini SEEP program, like the master's program. Thank you so much for your attention. I really look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Sigrid. That was a very excellent presentation. So we have a couple questions already. Alejandro, go ahead.
Thank you, John. Thanks for the presentation, Sigrid. I am based in France, so we are here in Europe. My question is the following. Let me read what I just wrote on the chat. I mentioned that there is a rich debate in economic philosophy about the pros and cons of preference versus need metrics. This debate has given rise to alternatives such as primary goods from John Rawls or capabilities from Sen. You actually mentioned parenthetically Sen. And my question was, could you comment on the advantages of Manfred Max Neff's needs metrics? Why did you choose it specifically? Why do you believe it's important for ecological economists to turn to the metrics of needs proposed by Max Neff? Thank you.
Yeah. I'll be with you in a second. For some reason, my cable isn't charging, and it's giving me an alarm. Just a moment, please. What's happening here? This is weird. Sorry, I'm not looking very organized today. I really don't know what's happening here to my cable. For some reason, it's not working. You know what? I'll join you on my phone. I'm sorry. I'll come back with the answer in a minute. So sorry. So yeah.
You have to unmute your phone, I think.
Thank you. Like a beginner, as if we hadn't done this for years in COVID. Anyways, to your question, why choose Max Neef's human needs approach over Amartya Sen's capabilities approach? I'm a great fan of Amartya Sen's capability approach. It's just difficult to explain to public decision makers and in participatory processes. That's what I found. So if it's a study that I'm doing without any stakeholder involvement, I normally use the capability approach. However, if it's something that I need to communicate, I find that the human needs approach is easier to explain. Why I prefer the capability approach is because it has both an objective and a subjective dimension. While the human needs approach is focusing sort of on trying to identify objectively how well our the human flourishing has been fulfilled. The capability approach has more room for maneuver for allowing for differences in different societies, for example, or for individuals. Yeah. We can amend that a bit because when using the human needs approach together with the satisfiers, which of course can change, can vary across societies and across people, then we do get this subjective element, which I think is also necessary, or societal difference element. We can get that also into the analysis. I hope that was clear.
Thank you, Sigrid. It was. Thank you.
Jenny wrote a question in the chat if she'd like to ask it. Go ahead.
Hello. Yeah, sorry. I just was curious when you're doing the evaluation of the different measures and you're working with the public, how, I guess I'm kind of wondering how holistic the picture is or the story is that they look at. So, obviously, every small amount of warming has more impact. So just wondering if that comes into discussions and whether, people are aware of that. So yeah, you can drive slower, but here are the, long-term kind of possible impacts on your, children, grandchildren, etc.
Yeah.
Or drive faster, I mean.
Yeah. I think that differs depending on what kind of approach we take, because in these participatory exercises, I find it fascinating that every time we normally work with 30 people in the room, stakeholders or citizens, and there are always one or two or three who say, I just came here to tell you that I'm not participating. I really don't, I want to keep my car. You can't take my car away. Like, well, I've never taken a car away from anybody. And this is definitely not our intention, but we just explained what we are doing, and maybe you want to stay and have a look and see how it goes. Or in one case where we worked for the Department of Trade and Industry, there were two individuals who came and said, we're just here to tell you that we think that this is not a true process. This strategy paper has already been written, and we are not participating. Again, we tried to inform them about what our understanding of the process was, and that to our knowledge it hadn't been written, and they chose, in all these cases, they chose to stay, and none of them actually left. What I'm trying to say is that quite often people come in a quite antagonistic mode, but with good facilitators in the room and with good practice in terms of how to design these participatory processes. It's amazing how creative, productive, and ambitious individuals become when they are given the opportunity to be part of the solution. I find that time and again really surprising. And for example, in a local study in our most southern city in Vierlach, which is in Carinthia, near the Slovenian border, in the end, the citizens became so ambitious that they wanted to ban all motorized individual vehicles from the city center. And we needed to remind them that maybe, well, if somebody has broken their leg, they might need to be transported in. So maybe you want to allow for some of this. So sometimes they're really getting very, very, very ambitious. And these are just 3 workshops. I mean, this is nothing that sophisticated, where they're just given the opportunity to inform themselves. We do not inform them because we don't lecture them. But we make galleries with lots of charts and information where they do gallery walks. They can ask questions. We bring in different types of experts. We seat them behind tables. We don't give them lectures, but rather make the experts available for them. And then they can interrogate the experts. And that, of course, helps with the quality of the discussion that we have then in the workshops. And of course, we give them a lot of opportunity to exchange views and, of course, information, but also views mostly, and their positions with others, with fellow citizens or with fellow stakeholders. And then also another design element of this participatory process is that we do is that we bring in the decision makers, because normally, I mean, the democratically legitimized decision makers, they need to be the ones who in the end make the decision. And not the members of this participatory process. So we ask the democratically legitimized decision makers to come to the first workshop and tell the participants of the workshop how they are going to use the information. And mostly, I mean, we recommend to them that they say something along the lines of that they will go with the recommendations from the participatory exercise, but of course there may be good reasons why they cannot take these decisions one for one, because there may be budgetary reasons. They may have tried this already, it didn't work, and also it may not be a measure that fits to their situation. But then we ask them to make a commitment, namely, if they don't adopt the measure that was suggested, that they explain in public. They explain publicly why they are not adopting a particular measure and how they are going to achieve the reduction nevertheless. And the decision makers have so far always been willing to do that. And that really empowers the participants and really shapes the process such that it's very creative processes, very proactive processes. And people want to be part of the solution, really.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? Rigo, go ahead.
Hi, how are you? I'm a PhD candidate here at the University of Vermont with Josh Farley, who's actually online. We're gonna ask me about my research, but I was gonna ask you just more a philosophical question about how you at Vienna have decided to call your program Socio-ecological economics. I know Cliff Spash just wrote the book Social-ecological economics, so I'm sure it's connected, right? I wanted to ask you if it is connected, and also we think a lot here about the dualism that has been created, especially in Western academia and Western thinking, between humans and the rest of nature. And I mean, when I think of ecological economics, I see it as an approach, a Western approach, that tries to do what people around the world already kind of do, which see themselves as being part of the ecosystems they're embedded in, right? So it just seems like I understand why there is sometimes a need to say we're trying to do more social approaches in combination with ecological. But I was just thinking, I don't know what your thoughts are on how can we help to overcome the dualism, the false separation, right, that we have created with our systems, especially in Western, like I said, in Western societies. Because I mean, it should be it should be just ecological. Everything is just ecological. That's kind of like how I'm approaching it. You know what I mean? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Appreciate the question. The first one is easy. Clive Spash, who is of course also at our institute, at our department in Vienna, and with social ecological economics and what I call socio-ecological economics, we mean the same thing. I just happened to call it in the subtitle of my thesis, Socio-ecological economics. And I started the master's program prior to Clive coming to Vienna. So we called it Socio-ecological economics, and the university didn't want to change it on request of Clive. So it's really just a different name for the same thing. We mean the same thing. Your other more substantive question. Yes, of course, humans are part of nature. Yet we do happen to have some special characteristics, and I think it helps with calling it socio-ecological economics because it builds bridges, for example, to our team within social policy or to our public law people who are working on governance. They feel more sort of spoken to when it's socio-ecological economics, and we invited them also to teach, for example, in the master's program. But a sort of a pre-analytic vision for the research, I fully agree that this should be a holistic approach and we shouldn't have to separate it out. We definitely don't want to call it like columns of sustainability, definitely not. But I think sometimes it is also useful to name what elements there are, namely that the economy is embedded in society. So there is society, which is different from nature, and there are the biophysical foundations. But yes, it is a Western perspective, absolutely.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the work that you do over there. We should be collaborating more for sure, Josh.
Would very much like to do that.
Comment. David, did you want to say what you had to say, or would you just rather have me read it?
Okay, very quickly. Hi, Sigrid. Thank you so much for all your good presentation. Having been in maybe hundreds of workshops, it seems that you skimmed over a statement that I liked a lot, which was skilled facilitators, because all of us have been in workshops with unskilled facilitators that kind of devolve into a mess. And when you have really good skilled facilitators, things work. So could you talk a little bit about the training and just, how you select these facilitators, how they work? Because I think for everyone who hasn't done dozens of workshops, how much a facilitator contributes to success is really underrated.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. In the UK, when I lived and worked in the UK, I worked with the facilitators from the New Economics Foundation, an organization which you may know. And I was fascinated by them. At the beginning, I was shocked by them because they told me for one workshop, and Sigrid, by the way, no computers in the room. This is impossible. I can't do that. I need to show charts. I need to calculate the rankings and so on. And they said, you can do it behind the scenes as long as it's not seen. But we are doing paper and pencil. And I was really not sure about it. But since the request for doing the work came through the New Economics Foundation, I went with them with that request, so to say. And I never regretted it. Because it really helped to bring in everybody. I mean, people are more and more familiar with, of course, IT and so on, but not everybody is equally familiar with it and equally at ease with it. So these were sort of strategic decisions that prior to the workshop already had to be made, and the facilitators were very clear about it. And then, of course, the facilitation technique. I mean, I'm always fascinated when I work with these guys because they have so much sensorium for identifying what's going on in the room. And not to say something when actually there is a possibility for the group to resolve it. I give you an example. With the last workshop in Carinthia, in the city of Vella, was this issue. One lady was really opposing everybody else and saying like, no, motorized individual transport, we need to have that, and so on. And there was a younger participant who said, I mean, I know I'm a neighbor of yours, so you don't drive very much. Why do you so much insist on motorized individual transport? And so on. And for a while, it was going back and forth, and she didn't want to say why it is the case. And then at the end, she revealed that she doesn't have a solution for transporting the cat litter, which is heavy. She can't carry that. It's beyond her physical capabilities. And she doesn't know how to get it delivered. So for that, she needs a car. But it was really the group that found out what the problem was. And then several group members immediately came up with suggestions of how to resolve that issue. And when it became a bit antagonistic between them, I was like, ooh, I would have a few suggestions. I would like to say something, but the facilitators clearly indicated, Sigrid, don't go anywhere near it. The group is going to handle this. And to know when to let the group resolve an issue that they have in a debate. And when needing to intervene, I mean, you need to be so skillful, have so much experience, and it's such a pleasure to watch them when they are doing that, and not to get carried away with, oh, here's another piece of information that I could add. That would be really useful now. No, let the group resolve it. Yeah, I really like to work with facilitators because I'm much too immersed in the modeling, in the information. I would too much focus on providing information, while, of course, this is a social process. It's a negotiation process which needs to unfold. So I think it's essential on the one hand to have sound analysis, but it's at least as essential to have good facilitators in the room.
There's a question by Herv. Would you like to ask your question?
Well, yes. Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. Have you also had the opportunity to test ideas on reindustrialization?
Okay. Interesting question. Thank you. Of course, like most industrialized countries, we are, on the one hand, struggling with the deindustrialization and then wanting to reindustrialize. It's not an area that I've worked in. Maybe I'll tell you what our institute is working on, because there's quite a breadth, but reindustrialization is not one of them. So I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank on this one. But I use the opportunity to tell you about sort of the research groups that we have at our institute. On the one hand, we have living and working decent work within planetary boundaries. So that's more the theory-based research group. This is where Roman Hausmann, whom I mentioned earlier, PhD who just completed, is working in. Where we're really trying to develop alternative economic frameworks that are productive for doing this kind of work. Then we have energy transitions, which, of course, we're doing the energy modeling and scenario development and participatory processes and multi-criteria analysis. Then we have a group that is called Sustainable Work, which isn't green jobs, but rather trying to explore what kind of innovations, social innovations we could have in the labor market that support a transition to a sustainable economy, such as reduction of working time. Be only interested in collective working time reductions, not individual working time reductions, but also other institutional changes in the labor market. And the fourth group is climate finance and economics, where, for example, it's headed by Irene Monasterolo, who is also a climate finance professor at the University of Utrecht in the Netherlands. And she was asked, for example, recently by the European Commission to make a suggestion for, it's a large project that she brought to us, make a suggestion on how to change the financial regulations of the EU so that the financial sector can become a lever for climate protection. So the question is not how can we become rich with climate finance, but rather how can we use financial regulation in order to support climate protection. And finally, the fifth group is global resource use, which is headed by Stefan Guillaume, a very successful group, and we just won the second ERC grant and, European Research Council grant. And what they are doing is basically biophysical accounting. So that fits very much to our university because we have lots of accountants at the University of Economics and Business. And in our team, they're also doing physical accounting. So sorry, I can't say more on your question. Apologies.
Right, so that's all we have time for today. Before we go, just want to do two things. Remind everybody next week, the seminar by Alejandro. Of course, everything with us is free, so please look into that, and hopefully many of you can stop by. And then lastly, really want to thank you, Sigrid, for a wonderful seminar, very interesting, and I know lots of good comments already about how much everybody enjoyed it. So thank you very much for taking the time to do this for us, and we appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for the invitation, and I wish you all a lot of strength. I know it's a difficult time in the US. We almost got a government similar to yours, but it was abandoned in the last moment. So you're not alone. Many countries are struggling these days. I send you a lot. I hope that you will have a lot of strength and courage to be successful despite all these challenges.
Thank you, and for everybody around the world, actually. So, so thank you again, and thanks everybody for coming, and we'll hope to see you next week.
Thank you. It's great.
Bye.
Thanks, Sigrid.
Bye, John. Thanks for the invitation.
Thank you.